I'm so excited to be sharing with you today a topic that many of you have been asking about, and that is PMAs, private member associations. I recently converted my business out of the public and into the private domain with the help, assistance, and guidance of this beautiful woman that I met named Dr. Layne. I'm going to be sharing with you today her story, what she does, and she's going to be helping educate us on PMAs. So Dr. Layne, thank you so much for being here with me today. And I'd love if you can start by just telling us a bit of who you are and what brought you into this line of work.
Well, thank you so much for a lovely introduction, and thank you for bringing me here. And I keep just having this inner chuckle at the difference in backgrounds where we are. You can tell we're on different parts of the coast. She's on the East Coast in the sunny Florida, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it is snowing in Reno, Nevada. So
wow. yeah.
Different. So I'm Dr. Layne Linebaugh, and I'm a chiropractor. And as we all know, 2020 hit. I began speaking out at county commissioner meetings against mask mandates and all of the craziness, and met a beautiful community of freedom fighters. Lots of people started coming to me as clients. And one day, one of them came in and said, well, the time for triage is over. We're doing PMAs. And I had one of those, we're doing a what moment? And so then the next week, I went to a training and thought this is a no-brainer. And I reached out to David Edwards of PMA Power, formed my PMA. And at that time, well, he did that obviously for me, my faith-based private health association. And at the time, I said to him, hey, this can't die with you. If you're ever going to train people, then I would like to be one of those people. So here we are, almost 2 years later, something like that. Yeah. Coming up on 2 full years of training and helping other people with PMAs and ministries. So I live in Reno, Nevada, as you said. I love the outdoors and nature.
Oh yeah, me too. What is a PMA and what are the different types of PMAs?
So private membership association, PMA, is men and women, so people getting together, asserting and standing upon their rights, our constitutional rights, to determine what devices, products, procedures, advice, or services will be most beneficial for them. So we get to choose rather than somebody dictating to us what we're supposed to do, be, say, and have. Men and women together, asserting and standing upon their right to provide and share legal and lawful services, procedures, advice, counsel, tips, and any other information or services which may be deemed beneficial to association members, and freely share, discuss, obtain, exchange, view, and or use that information and services by members of the association. So we get to determine what information, what education, what services, what tips, what counsel and advice between the members of the association. Again, rather than somebody just dictating, whereas in a traditional setting, like a doctor saying, here, you're just going to take this, don't ask questions. And by the way, you can't talk to anybody else about it in the office. It's really great because the information is not being censored through regulation or restriction upon those rights that we have from our Constitution. So bring it down. The PMA founder or creator is like the head of a family. And then the members of the association, they're like the family members. And we're sitting down at our dinner table, or we're in our private house on our porch, and we're having a discussion. Hey, that door needs to be fixed. Okay, I'm going to fix the door. We just had a private conversation and a contract. Nobody had to go get a license to get the door fixed.
yeah.
So it's all very internal. And this is important, that the private is one of those pillars that we stand upon. Did that make sense?
Yes, it did. And different types of PMAs are there? So I know there's like the standard PMA, there's
Yep.
a faith-based PMA.
Yep. So we have standard PMA, and that is the protections for all of them. But standard PMA protects freedom of speech, our right to associate and assemble, our religious liberty, religious freedom, medical freedom, as well as due process. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a bit as well. But so those are your protections in the standard PMA. Now, a standard PMA, this is somebody who might say, love it that there's all this religious liberty in this country, but it's not really my thing. Or say they have a drinking club in a dry county. Kind of hard to say, I've got a spiritual drinking club. That just
Yeah.
that might not fly.
Yeah.
So that's the standard, and it's very well known in countries, or not countries, states like Texas, where there's a lot of dry counties and a lot of drinking clubs. So that's the standard. And then we move over into the faith-based organizations, and there's two categories here. So if you have a piece of paper, maybe you just write faith-based organizations and you have two categories. So the first is our integrated auxiliaries, associations, and conventions of churches, quote unquote, churches. So those are things that are kind of like a church. And we'll look at more documentation on that as well. But this would be a faith-based private association. Same protections as the standard, only now because our country was built upon spiritual and religious freedoms, principles. That's why our founding fathers came here to this country. So we have more case law that protects the faith-based association. And we have this acknowledgement of a firmly held spiritual belief system. And the person that is doing this has to be aware also with the association that when I say I have a faith-based private health association, not everybody may know what that means. Okay, they might go, well, I'm not sure what's going on over there. So I may need to do a good job of explaining what I'm doing there, why I have a faith-based. Pretty simple. I minister to people all day long. Chiropractic principle is the power that made the body heals the body, as well as a Christian worldview. So to me, they go together. So right there, that would be a very strong standing. Now we move over to ministry, also a faith-based organization. Only when I say ministry, church, temple, synagogue, people kind of know what's going on in those organizations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like, well, there's worship, there's good deeds, there's probably some outreach. So it's really perceptually more recognized. And this is really good for someone who says, well, I am going to have some education going on. There also is going to be a health portion in the ministry. There's also going to be outreach. So there's a lot of different things happening in the ministry, and also over 1,600 citations ruling in favor of the protections of a faith-based organization, private, that is unincorporated and non-statutory in the ministry firmly held spiritual belief system domain.
And what types of businesses work well to be converted into PMAs?
So classically, because this dates back to 1802-03 was when our first PMA case was brought to the courts. But classically, alternative healthcare, alternative education, businesses based upon nature, because those are they're defined as being under God's law. It's easy to define healing as underneath God's law. It's easy to define education as under God's law, as well as worship and those types of things too. So, but really, since this has been known for so long, and this goes a little into why someone would want to do this, but we've got our religious freedom. So anybody that wants to be really protective of our freedom of speech and our right to get together, as well as to worship in the ways that we want to, that's a good business for you. That's it seems to be a natural fit.
Why would they want to convert into a PMA? What kind of benefits would this entail for them?
So I always joke with that. It's like, well, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I really want to back up just for a minute too, is when we say PMA, and you've heard me say private health association, you can have a private farming association, a private financial association, you could have a private healing ministry. So it doesn't have to be called a PMA for everything, and it does lend itself to then fitting a broader range of businesses and services. Okay. All right. So why wouldn't you want to? Because you want to protect, if you're really interested in protecting your life, your liberty, your speech, your assembly, your due process, the right of self-determination, then this is something that's definitely going to be for you. Homeschooling, choice of suppliers and products and or services, your choice of lifestyle, the foods that you want to ingest. There's rules and regulations on organic foods. Foods come in my city, you can't pick apples off a tree and sell them in a restaurant. It's just from the street, it has to come from somebody's commercial apple farm.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So we can turn that around and say, I'll pick apricots all day long and give them to the members of my association.
What well-known establishments are PMAs that people wouldn't normally associate to be a PMA?
Oh, this is fun, isn't it? Yeah, so you don't know about a lot of these, but boys and girls clubs, sports clubs, football, golf, baseball, basketball, those can all be private membership associations. And then we have the NAACP, that's a private association, referenced also in case law. The American Medical Association.
Wow.
Yep, that's a private club. Even state and national bar associations, those are private clubs, private associations where you must abide by their rules, and anything that you create is also subject to their rules and regulations. And then we have our well-known Republican National Committee and the Democratic National Committee.
Yeah, I could not believe that when I heard that. You really get a whole nother understanding of, how these things are structured into. Of course, we're never taught any of this in school, but its roots go back to the very beginning, to our Constitution. And I just love that we can still stand on those constitutional rights and exercise them.
Yeah. Well, and you look at all of these organizations, and if they're doing it and they don't want us to know, and sorry for the dog shaking noise, if they're doing it, they don't want us to know, why can't we?
Exactly. Yeah. And if they're benefiting from this structure and being able to have, non-censorship and run it in whatever way they choose, yeah, why not us?
Exactly. Which is exactly why they stopped teaching us about
Yeah.
this. Yeah. They didn't want us to know. Yeah.
And the Girl Scouts are also a PMA. Is that right?
Yep. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I just had a conversation with somebody about that, and she said, well, okay, so if there's and we've seen this, the harassment charges against the Boy Scouts, would that be handled internally, like, because a private association has its own tribunal, it has its own court, so would a case against the Boy Scouts be handled internally by the Boy Scouts? Well, it may or may not be, because these charges are substantial evil. They're clear and present danger. So that could go to a public court.
I'm not familiar with what's going on with that. What's going on?
Charged with some sex abuse crimes.
No.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, within the Boy Scouts. So
Oh wow. So they're still deciding whether they want to take that to like a public court?
I don't know for sure, but it was more the question is like, how would it be handled?
Yeah.
That would be one that would not be handled within the internal tribunal because it's substantive evil and a clear and present danger. So another good example is, get back to the drinking club. The police, they all know about those drinking clubs. They don't go in, it's private unless they get the call that there's been murder, rape, robbery, and then they go in.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
So
And I like that. I
yeah,
bet like
that's good.
everybody needs to be kept in check.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's when that's the right use of our legal system.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And could you please share with us about some case law?
Ooh, we've got some good references here. Okay, so we'll start back with the first one. And this was Marbury versus Madison in 1802, 1803. And John Marshall, the fourth Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, said essential to all written constitutions that a law repugnant to the Constitution is void, and that courts, as well as other departments, are bound by that instrument, referencing the Constitution. So all these laws, rules, and regulations that are actually against the Constitution, repugnant to the Constitution, we get to go back to that. And this is something that Chris Ann Hall, constitutional attorney, says. She says a lot of the new case law, the courts would really like to just look at those cases, and they don't want to reference all the way back. And we really should be doing so. All right, so that was Marbury versus Madison. And then we have the modes of association protected by the First and 14th Amendments, which Virginia may not prohibit. And that was NAACP versus Button. Also, the private domain is referred to as a sanctuary from unjustified interference by the state in Pierce versus Society of Sisters, and as a constitutional shelter in Roberts versus United States, and again as a shield in Roberts versus United States. And in addition, the U.S. Supreme Court in Thomas versus Collins specifically refers to the domains set apart for free assembly.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, so it's pretty powerful, and those are just snippets, but we're going to talk about it in a little bit of a recent case that won by standing on that freedom of assembly, freedom of association. So we'll talk about that a bit, but
yeah. And, just getting back to the First Amendment, which is the First Amendment, what makes this country so distinct comparable to the other countries is that this is a melting pot. There's so many different types of religions that people practice here, and they came here with the dream that they could practice their faith without persecution, and having the freedom to do that. And the fact that we can do that and we can coexist with others that are from different faiths, I feel like is what really makes the United States of America stand out from these other more ancient countries.
yeah.
And I just find that to be incredibly beautiful and a step in the right direction. I know that God wouldn't want all of us being dogmatic in our beliefs and saying, this is how it's only can be, and I'm only going to love this. And it's like just a more openness and a more evolved way of really practicing our spiritual beliefs and our faith while also coexisting in harmony with the rest of humanity. So yeah, I find it to be a very profound amendment for sure.
It's very beautiful, and if anybody wants to dig into that further, I highly recommend David Barton's book, Original Intent: The Courts, the Constitution, and Religion. It's a pretty deep read, I
Right.
think it's taken me 6 months at least,
Wow.
because it's case law after case law and quote after quote after quote. But they say that they came. That's exactly right. They came here to get away from religious persecution. Their favorite spiritual belief system was Christianity, yet they absolutely recognized that there were other spiritual belief systems already here in the country, and others would be coming. And they said, as long as there's morals and values, because we see that that makes a great society, then we want people to worship how that they choose.
Mm.
Yeah, pretty beautiful.
Yeah. And so share with us now, how does taxation play into all of this with the PMAs?
Oh, this is fun, huh? Okay, so when you have a standard PMA, really, the best way to do that is to just set up as a sole proprietor, because if you do LLC, now you're that creature of the state and you've just brought yourself right back into underneath and following their rules and regulations and laws. So it's still very protective of your First Amendment rights and liberties. But as far as taxation goes, there's really no special benefits. There is a code 501 A1, but I don't know a lot about it. And it does have a tax exemption benefit to it, but there's filing and recording involved, just like a 501c3 has to do. So if somebody wants to go look that up, go look it up. Have fun. So then now when we have a faith-based organization that's unincorporated, so that's really important to remember throughout this whole conversation, is that we're talking about an unincorporation. We're not going to go file with the state and say, oh, please, can I do my religious organization here? Can I have a faith-based association? Can I have a ministry? No, we're actually more so telling them, hey, I'm using this EIN number for banking purposes only for my faith-based organization that I'm creating. I'm going to use this EIN number. And then, so what this is, this 508c1a, this is really a pretty cool reference. Section 508 was codified in the Internal Revenue Code in order to formally establish the doctrine of freedom of religion, which had been a tacit standard upon which America was founded and governed since before it gained its independence in 1776. It is generally unknown to tax practitioners simply because law schools and accounting schools do not teach it. Section 508 refers specifically to churches, their integrated auxiliaries, and conventions or associations of churches. However, this tax code does not define these terms. It also does not define the term religion, because they cannot, because Congress shall not make any law regarding religion or the exercise thereof. So that's how 508 came into being. They needed a statute to describe what we were doing. Yeah.
And that is different from the 501c.
501c3,
Oh,
yes.
C3. Yeah. And I was reading about that one, and churches that usually go through that exemption, it limits their freedom of speech and their freedom of, let's say they want to promote a particular politician. It
Yep.
will prohibit that. So it's kind of a sneaky code with its restriction.
Yep. Yeah, they really, in the sweeping tax reform of 1969 was when they convinced everybody of these churches and nonprofits, that these religious organizations, oh, you should do this, with all the filing and the recording and for the benefit of being tax exempt, when they never had to do it in the first place, because spiritual organizations, religious organizations are mandatory except to the rule. So never had to do it in the first place. Yeah.
Powerful knowledge. So there has been an Amish farmer, and he's been all the talk in the PMA circles. he himself has a PMA that's been running for several years, and it's currently has been in quite a legal battle with the FDA. And it's been a very big deal. So I would love if you can share with us the story and where that's at right now with the courts.
So he actually won his case just recently. There's a couple little things left to do, but this was ongoing. And just because of being in the PMA advisor world, so apparently his documents were not were statutory. So he had that against him in the first place, and then he actually, I think, he actually invited the inspectors in. Just let him come in. Now, I don't for sure quote me on that, but he was told to stop producing his raw milk, his meats that everybody, his members, have agreed that that's the product and the service that they want.
Yeah,
Okay?
because he didn't use hormones in them, and he had very different practices that go back, and they're much cleaner.
I don't know if you've ever looked into it. It's kind of on my list, is the benefits of actually drinking raw milk as a healing practice, but you can't get raw milk in Nevada. Cannot get in Nevada.
Wow.
Even if I wanted to, I would need to find a private person and get some raw milk from their cow. So anyway, so that's the sort of thing that they were regulating with Amos and many other people. So and this has been ongoing for a while now. So he did some things that weren't very wise in his court case. He had a lawyer who didn't do him any favors, but this second lawyer, even though his documents were statutory, this second lawyer helped him win his case on the freedom of association.
Yeah, I believe he was a constitutional lawyer, right?
Yeah, I think his second lawyer is a constitutional attorney. Yep.
For those of you that don't know, this farmer, he was being charged with like a $300,000 fine. They had shut down his business, his association. They took all of the produce. They took it all. They seized it. And this was, and they were wanting to put him in jail. So that was kind of coming up too. And all of this was happening in December around the holiday. So they just really wanted to go after him, and I feel like they wanted to intimidate other private member associations into not taking these steps, these bold steps into really reclaiming our self-governance and our ability to self-govern. And even with it being statutory compliant, you bring it to the court and it still stands true. And the fee was reversed. He got out of all jail time. He got the seizure of his products were returned to him. And from my understanding, he is now reopened to his members. So this is just a really great example of a real-time case and, showing the strength of the PMA, even in today's temperament, which is very up and down. As we know, we're going through a very, I feel like a restricting time with government, and we're going through so many changes right now as a society that I think this was an excellent example and really gives us a lot of faith in our Constitution and in the power that it still holds.
Yeah. I have two others recent. One, it was North Carolina, I think. Anyway, they ruled that because it was a ministry, that it was okay to have education even without a license. Because it was a ministry, and in that state you have to have, everything has to be licensed as far as education. And then another one, New Jersey, finally, after, because we just don't know what we don't know, and it's scary to be challenged, and it's scary to have them standing at your door. So, and this is new for so many people that she just didn't know what to do. But when she finally showed her founding documents to the judge, he said, "Get out of here. It's out of my jurisdiction."
Wow.
So that was a big win too. So yeah, it's even with the corruption and I'll just say, leave it at corruption. Even with the corruption in our legal system, we're still winning.
Exactly. And I love the people that are brave enough to exercise their rights. And when that challenge comes, they stand in their rights, they stand in the truth. And I feel that God will always protect those who do that and that exercise the rights that He gave to you. You know, it's yours to reclaim them. And I don't want you guys, if this is something that you want to go into, don't feel intimidated. Just know that if you're working from the highest within yourself and you connect yourself to the divine and you've got the right intention, you will be protected. And there's a large community of us as well, so you know, we're not alone. And if they try to single pick us off, tons of other people, I'm sure even with this Amish farmer, he had tons of support and everyone coming to support him, to help in any way that they can. And it's wonderful to see this, because this is exactly the momentum. This is the energy of really reestablishing the republic and of getting back to self-governance and of enough usurping governance. You know, we've had enough of this and we're waking up, and it's just a matter of learning the knowledge and applying it to our lives.
Good stuff. We've been coming up with a little thing of the pillars of the private domain. So I'll share what we've come up with so far, which is really solidifies everything that you just said. So pillars, one of the main ones is private. Okay, private. What goes on, this is kind of funny, what goes on in my bedroom is private. But it's not because it's my bedroom, it's because it's private. And it's one's private business is one's private business. It's really just as simple as that. And because we don't owe any duty to our neighbors or to the state to divulge our business. So private is private. And then another pillar, of course, is the faith-based organization, this freedom of religion, this freedom of our spiritually held belief system. And that's been that tacit standard upon which the America was founded and governed. And then we've constitutionally, that's another pillar, right? It's right there, as you were saying, in our First Amendment in this Constitution, that we have these rights to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. And then another one that we didn't speak about so much is that contract agreement, contract law. So when we make that agreement, it's made in the private, and that's really well upheld in the court system, is that you and I have an agreement. Here's the contract, it's signed, and what are you going to do? So those are some really good pillars to help you feel solid, that this does have standing, that this is very lawful, it's long-standing. And when you hear people speak in the freedom circles, there's a lot about sacrifice and duty, and that we have a duty to our republic if we want to keep it. And so, yeah, there are people who are making a lot of sacrifices, time, energy, money, business, but it's that sit down with yourself, which I'm sure many of us did when 2020 happened, and said, whoa, okay, could I die? Yeah, I could die anyway. Could people I love die? Yeah, they're probably going to die anyway. Might I go to jail? Is this the hill I want to die on? Yeah, for me personally. And so those are the types of questions. It's like, what are you willing to sacrifice for our country? Because country, it's really God, country, family. Some people want to put family first. Well, if you don't have a country, you're not going to have a family the way you want it. So that's my little soapbox.
I'm going to go ahead and leave Dr. Layne's information in the description below. And if you would like to convert your business out of the public into the private, you can do so and let her know that Oxnelia recommended you. I'll also leave that in the description. Thank you so much, Dr. Layne, for being here with us and for sharing all of this insightful knowledge. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thank you so much. Thank you.